If you think age 61 is just another birthday on the way to 62, you are making one of the most expensive mistakes in retirement planning. I have watched people spend 40 years learning how to earn money and almost no time learning how the system will start taking it back. That is why I want to tell you something plainly. 61 is not a milestone. It is a deadline. Most people are trained to pay attention to the loud ages, 59 and a half because a penalty disappears, 62 because Social Security becomes available, 65 because Medicare starts, 73 or 75 because required minimum distributions begin. Those ages get all the headlines because the government puts a sign on them. 61 gets no sign. That is precisely why it matters so much. At 61, your retirement is still mostly a design problem. After that, it starts becoming a reaction problem. At 61, you can still move money, recognize income, harvest gains, qualify for health insurance subsidies, and build a tax plan without the system answering back from 3 different directions. At 62, Social Security enters the room at 63. Medicare's look-back starts watching you. Later on, required minimum distributions begin filling your tax brackets, whether you like it or not. I have never liked giving up flexibility. In business, I pay a great deal for optionality in life. I value it even more. And retirement, if you understand it correctly, is not mainly about money. It is about preserving control over future choices. That is why 61 matters. It is the last clean year before the machinery starts closing around you. Most people miss it because nothing seems urgent. No agency sends you a warning letter at 61. No penalty arrives in the mail. No one tells you that this is the last year you can act before every future move starts to create side effects. So people wait. They tell themselves they will think about Roth conversions next year. They will review their capital gains strategy next year. They will worry about Medicare later. They will figure out Social Security when they get closer. That kind of delay is how smart people quietly lose 6 figures. I want you to think about retirement as a giant control panel. At 61, the switches still work independently. You can adjust one without automatically tripping 3 others. After 61, the wires start crossing. One move changes taxes. Another changes future Medicare premiums. Another makes more of Social Security taxable. Another crowds out your room for later planning. You can still make moves after 61, of course, but they become more expensive, more constrained, and much harder to optimize. I would much rather act while the room is quiet than negotiate when the alarms are already going off. The first mechanism I want you to understand is what I call the clean window. At 61, Social Security is not yet available. That sounds like a limitation to most people. I think of it as freedom. Once you turn 62, the psychology of every decision changes, even if you do not claim benefits. The existence of benefits starts affecting your thinking. You start asking whether you should claim now or later. You start comparing withdrawals from your IRA against future Social Security taxation. You start running decisions through possible claiming dates, survivor scenarios, spousal timing, and future provisional income. At 61, you do not have to do that. Social Security is not yet on the table. That means this year is clean. You can plan taxes for what they are, not for what they might do to a benefit. You have not started. You can move money because it is mathematically smart, not because you are trying to tiptoe around a benefit system that is about to enter every conversation. There is tremendous value in one clean year. The second mechanism is what I call the shadow cost. Most people understand an obvious tax bill. Very few understand the invisible price attached to income decisions. After 63, Medicare premiums do not just depend on whether you are on Medicare, they depend on what your income looked like 2 years earlier. That is how the system quietly turns an aggressive Roth conversion or a large capital gain into a future health insurance surcharge. That is a shadow cost. You make one move today, the bill arrives later. You forget why it happened. The system does not. That is why 61 is so valuable. A large Roth conversion at 61 does not create an Irma consequence because the Medicare look-back window has not started pressing against you yet. Make that same move at 63 and you may buy yourself years of higher premiums for the exact same health coverage. I dislike paying hidden fees more than visible ones because hidden fees do not just take your money. They take your clarity. The retirees who understand 61 use that year to make their big, intelligent moves while the shadow cost is still absent. The retirees who wait often make the same moves later and then act surprised when Medicare starts charging them more. The third mechanism is what I call bracket real estate. Every year of retirement gives you a limited amount of tax space. The question is whether you choose who occupies it. If you do nothing in your early 60s, your traditional IRA keeps growing. Then later required minimum distributions begin, and the IRS chooses occupants for you. That space fills up with forced income. Then if you want to convert more money to Roth, sell assets, or create flexibility, you are no longer operating in a mostly empty building. You are trying to renovate after the tenants have already moved in. That is foolish timing. At 61, your bracket real estate may still be relatively open. No required minimum distributions, no Social Security yet, potentially modest income. That means you can decide whether to convert IRA money at 12% or 22% instead of waiting until the system shoves the same dollars out later at 24% or 32%. A lot of retirement planning comes down to one simple truth. The tax rate that matters is not the one you avoided this year. It is the lifetime rate you end up paying on the same dollar. Many people are proud of paying nothing today and then get punished later with large distributions, higher Medicare premiums, and more taxable Social Security. That is not tax planning. That is tax procrastination dressed up as prudence. The fourth mechanism is what I call layerable freedom at 61. You can often layer 4 valuable strategies at once. You can do meaningful Roth conversions. You can harvest long-term capital gains, sometimes even at a 0% rate. If your taxable income is low enough, you can position income to qualify for Affordable Care Act subsidies before Medicare begins. And you can begin constructing the income floor that will support you for decades. Try to do those 4 things later, and each one starts interfering with the others. A Roth conversion raises adjusted gross income. Capital gains harvesting raises adjusted gross income. AK subsidies depend on adjusted gross income. Later, Social Security taxation depends on related income formulas. Medicare surcharges care about modified adjusted gross income from 2 years ago. What looked like 4 separate opportunities at 61 becomes one tangled puzzle at 63 and beyond. That is why this year matters. It is not just that you can act. It is that you can still coordinate the actions cleanly. In my world, that is an enormous advantage. I do not only want good moves, I want moves that can coexist. Now, let me put this in plain language. Suppose you are 61, recently retired, with a taxable brokerage account, a traditional IRA, and a Roth IRA. Suppose your spending needs are moderate, and you are not yet drawing Social Security. This is the kind of situation where most people should sit down and ask a few very serious questions. How much ordinary income can I recognize this year and still remain in a favorable bracket? How much IRA money can I move to Roth now before future required distributions make that move far more expensive? How many capital gains can I realize without wasting the lower rate bands available to me? How do I keep my reported income low enough or deliberately tuned enough to preserve health insurance subsidies if I am using the ACA? Those are not abstract questions. They are the decisions that separate retirees who remain in command from retirees who spend 20 years apologizing to a tax system they never learned. When I look at 61, I do not see a birthday. I see a final negotiation before the terms become less favorable. And the irony is that retirees often waste this year because they are still mentally stuck in accumulation mode. Accumulation is simple. Earn, save, invest, repeat. Retirement is different. Retirement is choreography. You are no longer trying to maximize account size alone. You are trying to maximize after-tax spending power, long-term optionality, health care, affordability, and emotional confidence all at the same time. That requires design. If you have spent your whole life thinking that more money alone creates safety, retirement will be a rude awakening. 2 people can retire with the same portfolio and end up in completely different financial lives. One understands timing, tax brackets, Medicare, and benefit coordination. The other does not. One feels in control. The other feels hunted. The money may be identical. The experience will not be. This is where the 5th mechanism comes in. I call it the income floor. Most retirees think the main job is to protect the pile of assets. I understand that instinct, but the deeper job is to shape the baseline income that the rest of your life will rest upon. Every Roth conversion at 61 changes the future composition of your balance sheet. Every gain harvested with care can reduce future tax friction. Every year you avoid unnecessary growth in pre-tax accounts can reduce the size of future required minimum distributions. All of those decisions influence your future income floor, the amount of dependable, manageable, tax-efficient cash flow you can generate without tripping every wire in the system. If you build that floor intelligently, retirement gets calmer with time. If you ignore it, retirement often gets more fragile with time. And once you understand this, you begin to see why 61 is the age that deserves your attention more than the louder ages. At 62, you may claim Social Security, but the availability of the benefit complicates every future decision. If you claim the income is now active, if you delay, the option is still influencing all your planning. The simplicity is gone. At 63, your income decisions begin reaching forward into Medicare premiums. The shadow cost arrives at 65. You enter Medicare itself, which solves one set of problems and introduces another kind of accounting. At 73 or 75, depending on your birth year and the applicable rules, the government starts forcing distributions from traditional retirement accounts. At that point, much of the elegant planning window has already passed. That is why I say 61 is not a milestone. It is a deadline. Let me show you how people lose the advantage. A retiree reaches 61 and says, "I am not ready. I will think about conversions later." Then 62 arrives, Social Security becomes relevant. They delay claiming, but now every move feels psychologically tied to a future benefit. Then 63 arrives, they still have not acted. Now IRMAA is on the horizon, and every extra dollar of income carries possible future Medicare costs. Then 65 arrives. They feel less flexible, not more. Then the years pass, their traditional IRA grows. Their future required minimum distributions become larger. Eventually, they turn on Social Security, which itself can now be taxed. They hit required distributions later and discover that the brackets they once could have used cheaply are now crowded. They are no longer designing. They are absorbing impact. I have seen this movie many times. People think the mistake was failing to find a better investment. The real mistake was failing to act while the control window was open. Now let us talk about health insurance, because this is one place where people can make or lose serious money without realizing it. If you retire before Medicare and buy coverage through the Affordable Care Act marketplace, your premium subsidies can be highly sensitive to income. That means your tax planning is not just about taxes, it is also about the effective price of health insurance. This is another reason 61 is such a powerful age. You can often coordinate Roth conversions, capital gains, and income recognition around subsidy thresholds. Done intelligently, the value can be substantial. Done carelessly, one extra move can wipe out a benefit you did not even realize you were relying on. Again, this is what I mean by choreography. A sloppy retiree sees separate categories: taxes here, health insurance there, Social Security later, Medicare later. A thoughtful retiree sees one system. I have made a great deal of money in my life by understanding systems better than other people. Retirement rewards the same habit. The people who win are not always the ones with the highest balances. They are the ones who see the interaction sooner. I also want to address something deeper than taxes. When people move from earning to spending, many of them feel weaker, even when they are financially secure. They spent decades measuring progress by accumulation. Every month the pile grew, then retirement begins, and withdrawals feel like retreat. That is dangerous psychology. If you have not built a deliberate plan by 61, every future withdrawal can feel like a mistake. Every tax bill feels like proof you are doing it wrong. Every unexpected premium increase feels like punishment. You stop feeling like the owner of your capital and start feeling like a defendant in a process you do not understand. That loss of confidence can poison retirement even when the underlying finances are sound. But the opposite is also true. When you have used 61 properly, you enter retirement with a different posture. You know why you converted what you converted. You know why you harvested the gains you harvested. You know why your reported income sits where it does. You know what you protected, what you traded, and what you set up for later. You are not guessing, you are executing. That is how capital should feel, not anxious directed. If I were 61 today and preparing for retirement, I would do 7 things before I let that year go by. First, I would project my full year income with precision, not optimism. Guessing is lazy, precision creates room. Second, I would identify exactly how much space I have left in favorable tax brackets and decide whether to use it for Roth conversions. Third, I would calculate whether capital gains harvesting makes sense given my other income and deductions. Fourth, if I were not yet on Medicare and expected to use the ACA, I would model subsidy thresholds with extreme care. Fifth, I would look forward to age 73 or 75 and estimate how large my required minimum distributions might become if I do nothing. Sixth, I would think about Social Security not as an isolated choice, but as a future layer that will sit on top of everything I decide now. Seventh, I would write down a simple rule for myself. I will not allow an account type to become so dominant that it dictates my future tax life. That last one matters. Many people end up with too much of their wealth trapped in tax. deferred accounts. It looked efficient during working life. Later it becomes a command from the future. The government gets a say in timing. I do not like giving future commands to anyone, least of all the tax code. The best retirement plans are rarely dramatic. They are a series of well-timed, intelligent decisions made before they become urgent. That is the character of 61 quiet. Easy to ignore, extremely valuable. The world tends to reward action at obvious moments. Retirement planning rewards action before the obvious moment arrives. That is why I want to leave you with this thought. If you are 61, or soon will be, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Am I using this year to design the next 30 years, or am I sleepwalking into a system that will start making choices for me? That is the real question. Not whether you can claim a benefit next year, not whether you feel emotionally ready, not whether everyone around you is waiting. The question is whether you understand that control has a season, and that season is shorter than most people think. At 61, the system is still listening. It starts talking back, and once it does, every decision gets heavier, every move creates more side effects, and every missed opportunity becomes harder to recover. I have always preferred the position of the buyer rather than the forced seller. At 61, you are still the buyer. You can still choose the terms. You can still decide how much income to recognize, which assets to shift, what taxes to pay now instead of later, and how to build a retirement that feels deliberate instead of accidental. Miss that year. And you may still do fine. Plenty of people do. But fine is not the standard I use. If you have worked a lifetime to build financial independence, then your job now is not to drift into retirement. Your job is to enter it with structure, foresight, and the kind of discipline that got you here in the first place. That is why 61 matters more than almost anyone realizes. It is the last quiet year. It is the last clean window. It is the last moment before the system begins attaching strings to every move. And if you understand that, then 61 stops looking like a number. It starts looking like leverage.